Hi, everyone. I am Kimchi. Today I am joined by two beautiful women, Jen McDonough and Sigrid Nielsen. Jen and I go back a little ways. We've known each other for, in this lifetime, a little over a year, but I think that it goes farther back than that. And Sigrid, I've heard so many amazing things about you. The reason I wanted to pick your brain a bit, it's twofold. You are a superhero in my mind. You've done something that is like unbelievably vulnerable and open and raw. And in a way, I don't think that there's any little part of me that could do what you've done. I also have a family member that is so near and dear to me that is also transitioned from female to male. And we have not actually dove in. She's not ready, and perhaps I wasn't ready either. So this is a perfect opportunity for all of us to just be open. Jen has a YouTube channel, as you know, that you've already been on, all about transformation. And my podcast is Thrive and Manifest with Chi. Chi is actually, it's the life force that runs through all living things. And I'm half Korean, so that is kind of cute that it's spicy kimchi. So here we are.
I love it.
Another podcast
Absolutely
that you were on. Fascinating doesn't even cover it. When you were Mike, or you still do, you hunt, firearms instructor, parent, son and daughter now. And I don't know where to begin, but I thought one simple thing would be like, you used to be Mike. How did that name come forward as your new fully evolved female avatar?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thanks for having me here. And it's good to see you too, Jen. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. I'm really passionate about sharing my story from the standpoint that I feel like it's a story of victory. And I want to inspire the world, just one person at a time. Part of that is educating, but a lot of it, I find, goes beyond just, hey, I'm transgender. I was assigned male at birth, meaning when I was born, the doctors took a look at me and said, this is a boy baby. But my wiring, my programming was different. And I felt different my whole life. But and we're all about the same age, back in the, 70s and 80s, they didn't have words to describe what I was feeling. Like, I didn't understand that, like what kids these days would understand, well, that person's just trans, or they're just like gender non-conforming, and they have like a whole language around that.
Mm-hmm.
So recently by recently, last year, at the beginning of the year, I became aware that, wow, things aren't what they seem, and I'm transgender. And that's the first time I really understood that fact about me, that I was actually born a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and that I feel more comfortable going through life as a woman. That's my true self. It's my true nature. That's my chi. That's my spirit, right? That's my energy. So I got to choose my name. Yeah. The short story of that is, Sigrid it's a very Danish, Nordic name, and that's my heritage. I really wanted to celebrate where I came from. And it's part of a story that I'm writing too, my story. But my Danish heritage was, I grew up and it was a place where we didn't talk about things.
Sure.
It was like, hold your tongue and don't complain and tell everybody that everything is okay.
Yep.
So I wanted to explore more of like what the Viking heritage, or like the, Nordic myth and legend, which says, women are strong people. We're warriors. We're powerful, and we're equal, and we deserve to be heard. right?
We give birth. Okay.
No argument here. So Sigrid comes from two words, sig, which is victory,
Oh,
and
cool.
Frieder, which is German or Nordic for like beautiful. So it's victory, victory and beauty, or beautiful and victorious. So I hope that's not too conceited, but what I've
Oh,
gone through
no.
really is a victory. It's a major victory. And for the first time in my life, I felt beautiful and special.
You look like you're having fun, being 100% yourself, and
Yeah.
that's something that I struggle with. Jen and I have talked about this before. We're aware that we don't walk through the world with a lot of physical challenges when we meet somebody. We know that. We get, number one, we pay attention to it. There's something to that. We pay a lot of attention, maybe too much. And we don't have those challenges of those face-to-face meetings. People are generally kind to us. It's said that babies smile when you smile. People interact with you, the energy that you get off. Do you feel like energetically things have changed for you when you meet people? When you were Mike and they knew who you were and what to expect, and now that they meet you, the real you, is there a shift on how you feel when you meet them?
You know what, Kim? Absolutely. Because the energy that I'm putting out to the world these days
Mhm.
is energy that says, I know who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm not just comfortable in my own skin, but I'm here to celebrate who I am. And that doesn't mean I'm better than or more important than, but
Mhm.
like I mentioned before, like for the first time in my life, I finally feel like I'm worth it. Like I'm worth celebrating. It's really hard to go through the world not like feeling uncomfortable in your own skin and not really understanding why. But when I was going through the transition I mean, we're all transitioning, right? So I'm
All the time.
still
Mhm.
kind of like in transition, but
Mhm.
um, I, it struck me that so many people feel that way. And Jen and I have discussed this on her podcast, that
Mhm.
so many people feel uncomfortable in their own skin.
Yes. Yeah, I think we're all handed shame at some point in our childhood. I've been doing a little bit of work around that, trying to pinpoint where did my shame come from? Because it's not something you're born with. It's not something given to you as a child. Children are just messy and happy and full of joy. And then different adults and different experiences start to give them this feeling that they're not enough. And we carry that for a long time. So that's specifically why I wanted to talk to you, because it is really amazing. I know you and Jen have a history, in the rooms of AA. So there's other recovery, more superpowers behind that. But for me, I still struggle with what do people think? And I've become very, very private because of that. I have learned this protection method of just staying behind the scenes. Of course, I love on fire the people who I'm close to, but everybody else that's not in that inner circle, they don't need to know the real me. And this has been a challenge that I'm working on. And so I'm really grateful that you're here to show people an example of, like, it doesn't have to be that way. You can just be you. And I see you smile from the heart. That's something different. There's people who smile and you see that they're hiding behind that smile. And then there's joy and smiling from the heart, which I know Jen has. I see it in you too. Do you have any people currently in your life, Sigrid, that are kind of role models for you or heroes in any way?
Well, I just want to say, I'm going to give a shout out to Jen, because she and so many other women in the rooms of AA are a daily inspiration to me.
That makes
But
sense.
certainly, like, I applaud Jen for living her truth. And like, let's face it, we're not perfect, but like to be able to live your truth with humility and grace and be like, well, I made a mistake today and I'm going to own up to it. And like, the world doesn't have to end. Like, I don't have to cover it up. And that's what I learned from my childhood. Like, hide any of your mistakes. Do
Mhm.
not let anybody see your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Growing up as a little girl who
Wow.
was told she was a little boy,
Mm.
you know, I had to be the best actress in the world. And but anyway, so I'm inspired by the women in AA, including you, Jen.
That's cool.
Well, thank you. I just really want to thank you and say I super appreciate what you just said, Sigrid. You're a genuine soul, and so much beauty in that. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. Thank you so much. No, that means a lot to me, and I know it's coming from the heart too.
Mhm. I think what's interesting is I've gotten older. I know that you are not your body at all. You know,
Mhm.
you are your soul, your energy, your chi, your life force. Prana is what they call it in India. And these are like avatars, right? That's all. They're just
Yeah.
outward expressions. If we were our body, are you the baby version? Are you the 5-year-old version, the 20-year-old version, the 50-year-old version? Which one is you? None of them. This is like the car that we're driving. But I do get that there has to be a match, you know, on the inside and outside, that in order to interact with the world, who you are has to match on the outside too. Sometimes we're so stuck on the outside that we forget that's not who we are at all. And I've always found my people are the ones who intuitively get that. So it's not something ever needed to be explained. They get it. It's our language. But for a lot of people in the world, it's a brand new concept. They are so stuck on the physical and the outside, and they have a hard time with someone saying, that's not actually who I am. This is who I am, you know? When you decided to tell family and friends, I'm sure it was a process. I know that you have a son. Was that difficult, or did they already kind of know?
Well, I kind of, you know, touched on this earlier in my story, but like being trans was really hidden from me and everybody I knew
Okay.
for most of my life. And so I spent 48 years as Mike, not really knowing that I was transgender. That all said, it was a hell of a surprise to most people because, like you implied, you know, at the beginning of our story, like, I'm a firearms instructor, a hunter, you know, I fix cars, I, you know, built a deck, my ex-girlfriend's house, you know, like I've got a tool belt and a drill press and all this stuff. So like, but those things aren't necessarily just, they don't just belong to men. Like,
No, you're a
right?
badass bitch. That's what I would say.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I, you know, I embraced all those things
Yeah.
because that's the clothing or the shell that I had to put on to protect myself. I learned from a very young age the world was a dangerous place.
Mhm.
And that it wasn't safe. Like people didn't want to really hear my truth.
No.
Then when I got sober, I started to practice my truth and was like, wow, this feels amazing, even though it's not what everybody else is talking about.
Mhm.
And if you've ever been to the rooms of AA, people share a truth that is unlike a truth that you'd hear most other places.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
But I guess I'm starting to bring, I mean, for me, living my truth now out as a trans woman is a version of that truth that a lot of people don't see. And so I get like, wow, you're so courageous and you're so brave. It's like, thank you. And it took Mike a lot of courage
Yeah.
just to show up on a 24-hour-a-day basis and just get through the world. This for me is actually way easier. So that's kind of a tangent from the question you asked, but my friends and family, very, very few of them unfriended me, blocked me, told me that I was like, you know, you're going to hell, you're not like, you know, you're an abomination. Those things I have heard. I have heard those things. But most people who knew me, they could see like what you see, what you've described in me. And that's humbling for me, and that my heart shines through, that I'm very genuinely happy that this is the first time it's like, this is not an act.
Yeah.
So my
Well,
parents are baby boomers, and they call me their daughter now. And, you know,
okay.
it's very amazing how accepted I've been everywhere. Jen knew me when I was Mike,
Yep, I sure
and
did.
I started to go to all women's AA meetings, and I mean, I've been so accepted. Like, never once has anybody like questioned whether I should be there. But partly, I'm pretty confident about who I am.
Right, right. You worked through all of it. So Jen, for you, since you knew Mike and you know Sigrid,
Yeah.
do you see not only just an energetic shift, but a peace and calmness and joy for life that wasn't there before? I know the rooms of AA have a lot going on already. And then we have this other layer of just huge transformation. So it's multifaceted, but what have you seen?
I would describe it as a blossoming, right? I sat in the rooms with Mike when he was Mike for a lot of years. And one of the ways that I would describe him, which I think is indicative of Sigrid's character, is that, you know, she has always been very keen and very profound, and has always shared, you know, an elevated type of wisdom and a genuineness from her heart. And I think that, you know, that is who she is. But now, you know, having interacted with her as her more true, genuine self, her having found herself, literally found herself from the inside out, it's a brighter light that's more, it's I would describe it as like a flower just blossoming and opening up to the, you know, the world as it's. And I think definitely what you were saying, Sigrid, about the type of confidence that you walk around with in terms of who you are, it draws in that acceptance, whether if that makes any kind of sense, in terms of like that magnet or that energy that's put out. And I just think it's such a beautiful thing. And I do know and will say that I love and appreciate, you know, all the wisdom that you bring to the table in the rooms of AA, and relative to recovery and our disease that we suffer with. And, you know, today it isn't a suffering, you know, today we get to escape disaster together. And it's a beautiful thing.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing because we have these great lives, right? These lives that are really genuinely flourishing. And, you know, and I can say the same for myself in terms of having, for the first time in my lifetime, been walking out, really finding myself and being able to live from that space. So yeah, that's how I would describe my experience with Mike from Sigrid. And it is you know, Sigrid's been Sigrid for, I think, has it been a year?
Well, I've been out since, I've been living as Sigrid since May 1st of last year, 2021.
Yeah.
So it's been, you know, not quite a year and a half that I've been living, you know, 24/7 every day as my true self.
Yes.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. And I want to say that for me, looking back, you know, Mike was living his best life. He was doing the best he could. And he was still, I gotta say, he was still struggling and suffering every day, because it was like, oh, I'm alcoholic. Wow. That opened up a huge chapter in my life of recovery and like living better than I ever had before. Turns out I've been using alcohol to cover up a lot more than just my character defects. I was hiding my true self. And, you know, it took a while of showing up, working a program of honesty. And you know what, Kim, getting rid of that shame, that was key in me being able to come out as myself. Because I was deep down ashamed of who I was, but there was this little voice inside me that always said, You are sunlight. You are beautiful, and you need to shine that light to
Mhm.
everyone in the world. And that's the part that I always held on to.
You are very disarming. I don't think that anyone could meet you and automatically be offended in any way. But rewinding a bit, my upbringing, and I know it could be very similar. I grew up in a Christian home. Nothing wrong with Christianity, it's beautiful. But it had a lot of rules and a lot of boxes, a checklist of expectations, right? And so when my niece became my nephew, we are all confused onto how to handle that. You know who handled it with the most grace? My 91-year-old mother.
Wow.
Not me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even get the pronouns. I couldn't speak correctly without offending. So I just stopped speaking. And I have left it up to him to start that conversation whenever he's ready. And that's I gotta honor that timeline. What I do know though is people are confused because we identify as the outside only. The confusion goes away when you figure out who you really are, that you are an eternal being in a meat suit. You know, so now that
Right.
you've joined the ranks of the single white females, anything anything surprise you about living as fully embodied as a woman?
Yeah, well, first of all, something that you said about living like that we're a spiritual being and that our body is just a suit or whatever. I think that's very true. And I want to say that once I started moving through the world as female,
Mhm.
my spirit felt better.
Yeah.
So I do think it's crucial that body and spirit, are aligned.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not just, it's a partnership. Anyway, I hope that makes sense to
It
your
does.
listeners.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
makes sense to me. I've even spoken with Jen about it. Like, I need the inside and the outside to reflect each other because not everybody's going to have the time to get to know the inside, or will I let everybody in? They have to be matched. I have to feel
Yeah.
like you're my people and you get it. And I don't have to go through every spiritual concept in order to have a conversation. It either is in alignment or not. And all of us do speak that language. If you could go back to the 5-year-old version of you, to 5-year-old Mike, what would Mike tell Sigrid? That child.
It's such a powerful question. 5-year-old Mike, it's such a bittersweet time for me because it's a time when I experienced, personal sexual trauma. And so 5-year-old Mike, when he turned 5, is a lot different from 5-year-old Mike when he turned 6. And confused and frightened and unsure about who he was. But I think to answer your question, I think that if he understood or could even possibly understand, he would see the beautiful, wonderful spirit that I have become. Like, I feel like for me, as I reflect on my earlier self at all ages, I want to bring the message that Jen said. You are just waiting to really, really shine and show the world your true self. And when you do, it's going to be amazeballs. Like, the world is going to reflect back to you this amazing energy that you're putting out there.
Yes.
Now, that said, what it's like to be a single white female, it's a lot different than it was being a cishet, straight white male filled with privilege who was actually really, really scared of everyone and everything in the world. I'm more confident, but let me tell you, I've experienced hate, discrimination, harassment, physical and verbal harassment. I was terminated from my job as a 26-year financial professional after I came out as trans and asked them to use my proper pronouns, use my correct name, and maybe update their system so that they could get a little education in their company about what it is to be gender non-binary. Fired. But as a cis het straight white male, I could throw a stapler, I could yell at people, make people cry, and everybody's like, Mike is just getting work done over here. So yeah, it's a lot different. And I'm also very, it's very humbling to know that, wow, I came from a lot of privilege, and I need to be very humble about that. And yet I was suffering daily, as Jen can attest. Yeah. So
it must be wild to be able to switch places in life, because I think that's where real compassion comes, is when you are with another human and you sit with them and listen and you actually feel their experience. Well, you've had more than one experience, multiple.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be trans, actually. I'm actually in many ways more grateful to be trans than just to have been born assigned female at birth, matching my true gender identity, because it's given me such a perspective. And now I have the privilege to be able to listen to others' journeys. There's been so many women who came out in the 80s and 90s, and even before, as trans. I owe them a lot, because in 2022, look, it's a lot easier. I have health insurance that covers some procedures that I want to get done or that I have gotten done. That didn't exist for them. So I have a lot of gratitude and a lot of humility to walk in their footsteps.
I'm completely naive with this, Sigrid. Is it legal to terminate someone based on their gender?
Well, there's a lawsuit that's pending.
I don't know.
It's not legal.
Okay.
It's not legal to do that.
Yeah, so that's the cool thing. There are legal protections now in some states, not everywhere.
Yeah.
But in Minnesota and other states, there are lawful protections that it's a 14th Amendment guarantee that people can't, it's equal protection of the laws. So I have a degree in political science, political theory. So I'm kind of geek out about stuff like that too.
No, it's perfect. I am in real estate business since '99, and a lot of what we do for continuing education is just law. And I'm really fascinated by who we used to be and what we used to say, who could do what. We've come a long ways, and absolutely a protected class when it comes to the real estate law. I just was not aware of anyone who's actually lost their job because of it. So we're behind you. You go for it. So what does that mean for you now? What are you doing with your free wisdom?
So I do feel like I've been called to share my story. Yes. The one thing that I've been really passionate about over the past decade is connecting with other human beings, and getting sober gave me the privilege to be able to do that, to actually have real relationships with other human beings. But now that I'm actually representing myself as my real self, it goes even deeper. I'm so much more grateful. And I feel like it's a privilege to share my story, not just for people who maybe want to do a gender transformation, who realize, so that I can be an example of what it is. But I feel like I'm an ambassador to the cis world. That's the non-transgender world. And being able to normalize what it is to be trans. You're just going to find me at Ridgedale or the Galleria shopping. I'm just going to buy lunch wherever. I'm not ashamed or afraid. I'm hanging out at the MIA, Minneapolis Institute of Arts today, and that's where I do writing. And so I'm writing my book, I'm writing my story, and I want to share my story with the world as a way that I think all people who feel uncomfortable in their own skin can maybe realize they're not alone, and you deserve to be heard.
That's amazing. What, do you have a title for the book yet?
Yeah, it's called Letters from Sigrid. And so it's kind of poignant that you're asking about younger Mike, because that's who I'm writing to. I'm writing to my younger self, and it's really a journey of exploration as to where was Sigrid at age 5, at age 12, at age 16. And I'm finding like I've always been there. I've always been there with Mike
Yeah.
in spirit, in spirit. And some days I was there just a little bit, and some days I was like, wow, I could have maybe come out if there would have been language or opportunity to do so back then.
Yeah.
But anyway, here I am.
So out of curiosity, now that you're sharing all of this, and I absolutely love that, and I knew that you were writing your book, and I love the question about 5-year-old Mike that Kim brought up, and it just reminds me how so many of us have a story to tell. And in those stories is, lessons and, experiences and, trauma and victories and all those things comprised that we all seem to go through to end up where we are, which has brought you to who you are today. But what I'm wondering is, in that moment of your Mike and you come to the realization that you're not Mike and you're Sigrid, like literally internally, what was that moment like? Like what was the conversation that went on in your head, or what was the epiphany moment or the thought, or like, how did you find her? How did you literally like connect from the disconnect and find her?
Yeah, wow. Thank you. That's a great question. I had to work this program of honesty, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to do that quite a bit before I would have even been willing to entertain this idea. The one thing that I'm realizing is that if 40-ish year old Sigrid went and visited 16-year-old Mike, 22-year-old Mike, 36-year-old Mike, and said, bitch, you're transgender. You are going to be fabulous. Like, you should just like come over to where it's like getting real. Mike would have said, no way. You can count me out. I will never do that. So to come to this place where honestly, Jen, I use the tools that I learned in that program, the 12 steps, because at first I was like, wow, I feel way more comfortable moving through the world as a woman. Obviously I had dressed in women's clothing, and that was kind of a clue for me. I had never really done that before, but I'd experimented with it, and that was like a clue. And it's like, wow, I move through the world differently. I'm more at peace. I am like happier and really blissful. But because I know that I don't necessarily need to take immediate action on just something that makes me happy in the moment, I said, you know what, let's just explore this a while, because it seems like it's right, but I'm not quite sure. But honestly, like at a certain point of time, and I had really done some work in therapy to let go of shame, and shame of who I was and shame of what I had done. And I was in a relationship with a woman who really I felt safe and trusted and heard and seen. And in that environment, I was really just able to accept myself. I literally just woke up one day, Jen, and I was like, well, you're definitely transgender. And I don't know what that means, but it might mean you're going to be a woman some days and a man some days, but this is definitely your truth, and you shouldn't be afraid of it. When I finally really, really embraced it, it's when it was way more uncomfortable for me to just like put on literally pants again and not wear makeup And it was like, no, you're female. And thank God for the work that I'd done in AA, because it allowed me to just literally just step into it.
Wow.
And just like, this is who I am.
So in a nutshell, and I love this because in a nutshell, it really is 100% about the truth, which starts within. And I know, like on our coins, it's coined to thine own self be true. So really, like being and finding and living and knowing and expressing and saying and doing your truth. And that's a mouthful. That's a mouthful.
It's easier said than done. And it took me 8 years of working this program of honesty before this was revealed to me. I just want to say, Kim brought up earlier about just the courage to go out there without judgment and live your truth. And for me, it was like, once the truth was revealed to me, I really felt I had no alternative. And it's not like life is easier. People treat me disrespectfully. They misgender me. They see me as less than a real woman and definitely not a man sometimes. But it's still, like I said, it's so much easier living your truth. I mean, for me, like, I wouldn't give it up for a second. Absolutely.
Can I just say too, in what you just said, I really love that, because in terms of a societal perspective, a lot of people act weird in their own uncomfortability. I'm trying to say the word uncomfortable, just being uncomfortable themselves. They act and they respond weird, and they don't know what to do. And I mean, I will confess, I know when we were out to eat one day, I think I referred to you as a he or something. I did, I think. And I mean, I made my apologies, but it is something that I don't, I think that for people, and it's unfortunate, because I don't even like when you were describing how you've been mistreated, it's hard for me to even hear that, because I just think that I always revert back to love, and just, we're all just people. And
right on.
But it really is not a you issue in my mind. It's a them issue. It's a their issue. And not really knowing. I think that there's just so many people that are uncomfortable themselves. And I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm just saying.
No, I think you're onto it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's old paradigms that we've been taught, and then there's our own belief system. And at some point in our life, we let go of what other people taught us is the truth, and we just discovered the truth. And that's evident with Sigrid, with you being fully you. And I'm 54. I have 4 boys, some of them adults, some of them a little guy. And I did at one point in my life question, how do I teach my son, the youngest one, about the world today? And I never even had to question myself, because honestly, he teaches me.
Isn't it true?
I love it.
And that is the best place to come from, is coming from the childlike love that we all had for each other way long ago, where we didn't judge anything until parents told us, until adults told us what's right, what's wrong, do this, don't do that, behave this way, don't talk about that, you're too wild, you're too this, you're too that. A child is loving and messy and unjudgmental. They don't see all of the roadblocks that scared adults have created. And so I learn from Jameson all of the time. That's one of the best things about having a young child. Yes, I'm exhausted, but I get to continue to see the world through the eyes I used to have. And so with that, my final question, Sigrid, you have the platform. What would you tell the world who's not quite there yet, who's not comfortable? What would you want to share with them about people in general, but your your experience and others who've gone through this.
Yeah, thanks so much again for having me on your channel here, Kim. You know, I have a 15-year-old son, and a big part of why I do this is because it's important for me to show him something that I never saw as a kid, and that is live your truth no matter what. Do it for you. And when you do it for you, you're doing it for the world. Like when you are the best version of yourself, you're making the world the best place it can be. And I know Jen believes in that. It is my privilege to be this person and to share. And it's not easy. I was told that as a young kid, you can do anything. You can be anyone. But really, this between the lines, it was like, no, you really can't. That is not true.
As long as it fits in this box with these rules.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So, but the message that I want to bring to people is that there's more to the world than what you know. And gender, this is like what I say about being trans or gender non-binary, meaning that you don't necessarily identify with female or male, somewhere in between, or maybe none of the above. Like that's what we call advanced gender studies. It's not something that's different or wrong because it's incompatible with the way we've always looked at it. It's something more. It's something in addition to,
Right.
and it's understanding, because I'm living it, and so I understand it at a level I never did before.
Yeah.
But it took for me living in my skin like this to get it. And I'm sad that it took so long for me to figure it out, but I'm so grateful that I can share that message today. So, and to the people that maybe, I mean, I was the first trans person I ever met at 48 years old. There are a lot of trans people out there. Some are out and some are still closeted. It's just, let me just say, first of all, it's okay to just ask questions. Even if it's, hey, what gender pronouns do you use? Do you go by she, her, he, them, whatever? It's okay to ask. I would never get offended if somebody just asks. It's like, well, I'm kind of going for, like, you can kind of tell, like, I'm kind of going for she here.
Yeah.
But sometimes people will ask anyway, and I'm not offended.
That's nice.
Secondly, just realize that it's your experience or your understanding shouldn't be dependent on your acceptance of that person. Like, we can accept a person without necessarily understanding why they're doing something or why they are who they are. But just to know that they've been on a journey, and it's been a long one probably, and probably a difficult one. We've all been on a long, difficult journey, and we're all survivors today. So just that acceptance that Jen keeps talking about, which is one of the reasons why I love you so much. And we all have to work on it every day. So that's my message to the world, and I really appreciate you having me here today.
Absolutely. Two beautiful souls. Thank you both.
Oh, 3 beautiful
I want
souls.
a signed copy of the book
3.
when it's ready. I want a signed copy. And I think Jen's got some great ideas about the cover. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure I have the artwork already. Yeah. Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Definitely meet for coffee to talk about that. Love you both. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. And until next time.
Awesome.
Thank
Yay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.